For over a decade, millions of viewers have invited Drew and Jonathan Scott into their living rooms, mesmerized by the comforting, predictable rhythm of their hit television show, Property Brothers. The formula is universally understood. A desperate couple is shown a beautiful but hopelessly out-of-budget dream home, followed by a rundown fixer-upper that they initially despise. Then, with a wave of Jonathan's proverbial magic wand and Drew's real estate savvy, a sledgehammer swings, the drywall dust settles, and a breathtaking masterpiece is revealed, all within a tidy 43-minute episode. It is a modern television fairy tale, a comforting sanctuary of problem-solving in a chaotic world. But beneath the freshly painted shiplap and the gleaming quartz countertops lies a far more complex, deeply human, and surprisingly dark reality. When the studio lights dim and the production trucks roll away, the pristine facade of the Scott brothers' empire begins to fracture, revealing a tangled web of stage sequences, dangerous construction shortcuts, grueling legal battles, and profound personal tragedies that completely redefine what we thought we knew about television's favorite twins. To understand how the Property Brothers machine eventually buckled under its own weight, one must first look at the incredibly unglamorous origins of the men who built it. Long before the tailored suits, the Emmy nominations, and the $100 million brand, Jonathan and Drew Scott were simply two struggling artists trying to survive in Vancouver. Born in 1978, the twins were not born with a hammer in their hands or a keen eye for real estate comps. In fact, their earliest aspirations were rooted entirely in the performing arts. Jonathan was a devoted illusionist, spending years honing his craft and even performing under the somewhat cryptic stage name Room Service, while Drew threw himself into the deeply unpredictable world of professional acting. For a long time, the starving artist cliché was not a metaphor, it was their daily reality. They faced constant rejection, empty bank accounts, and the creeping dread that their dreams might never materialize. The pivotal turning point did not come from a Hollywood agent or a sudden stroke of casting luck, but from a harsh dose of paternal reality. Recognizing that his sons were spinning their wheels, their father sat them down and delivered a piece of advice that would alter the trajectory of their lives forever. Stop waiting for the phone to ring and start building something tangible. Taking the advice to heart, the brothers pivoted hard into the world of real estate in the early 2000s. They did not start with a massive portfolio or wealthy backers. Instead, they scraped together a tiny down payment to buy a house near their university, rolled up their sleeves, and learned the grueling trade of renovation through sheer trial and error. When they flipped that first property for a $50,000 profit, the addiction set in. The magic tricks and acting auditions were quickly relegated to the back burner as the brothers realized that their true talent lay in recognizing the hidden potential in distressed properties. Yet, the road to television was still paved with soul-crushing cold calls, door knocking, and the relentless rejection of homeowners who had no interest in selling to two unknown 20-somethings. Even when Drew attempted to merge his acting ambitions with his new career by auditioning for a show called Real to Idol, he was unceremoniously rejected. That rejection, however, serendipitously led them to a production company desperate to find a charismatic pair of brothers to anchor a new kind of home renovation show. When Property Brothers finally premiered in 2011, it felt like an overnight sensation to the public. But it was, in truth, the culmination of a decade of sweat, failure, and relentless hustle. As the show exploded in popularity, evolving from a Canadian cable novelty into a dominant American HGTV juggernaut, the logistical demands of producing reality television began to clash violently with the realities of actual construction. The Property Brothers franchise eventually spawned hundreds of episodes, numerous spin-offs, and a massive corporate conglomerate. But the secret to maintaining that breakneck pace was a quiet complicity in manipulating the truth. Jonathan Scott himself eventually admitted to Pop Sugar what many industry insiders had long suspected. The foundational premise of the show, the house hunt, is largely a theatrical construct. Because finding a home in the real world is a tedious, months-long slog fraught with paperwork, fallen-through deals, and crushing disappointment, it does not make for compelling television. Therefore, producers frequently cast families who have actually already purchased the fixer-upper before the cameras even begin rolling. The agonizing choice between House A and House B that viewers agonize over is often nothing more than an elaborately staged piece of reverse engineering, designed purely to establish the narrative conflict required for a reality television script. But the fabrication does not end at the front door. It extends deep into the very bones of the houses themselves. The editing room is where the true miracles of Property Brothers are manufactured, often at the expense of factual accuracy. There are documented instances where the layout of a home was intentionally obscured for the sake of a narrative payoff. In one notable example highlighted by entertainment journalists, a participant's full bathroom was edited to appear as a simple, easily renovated powder room during the final reveal. The reason was purely logistical. A full bathroom renovation is messy, complicated, and difficult to compress into a tidy television timeline, whereas a powder room offers a quick, punchy visual transformation. What the audience was sold as a miraculous overnight overhaul was, in reality, a carefully curated deception. The house was no longer a home. It had been reduced to a prop in a carefully constructed drama, where structural realities were quietly sacrificed on the altar of the 30-minute runtime. This relentless pressure to deliver cinematic wow moments on an impossibly tight schedule created an environment where the fundamental rules of construction were inevitably bent and sometimes outright broken. A standard, safe renovation might take 6 to 8 weeks, allowing for proper curing of materials, thorough electrical inspections, and meticulous plumbing work. The Property Brothers machine, however, demanded that these same transformations be compressed into a matter of days to accommodate filming schedules, lighting setups, and crew availability. When a director, a lighting technician, and a camera crew are all being paid by the hour and waiting in the living room for the tile to be laid, the immense pressure to cut corners becomes almost irresistible. Drew Scott has openly acknowledged that the timelines on the show are wildly compressed for television, framing it as a necessary evil of the medium. But framing it as a necessity does not change the physical reality of what happens when wet concrete is rushed or when complex electrical panels are wired by exhausted contractors operating under extreme duress. The brothers, who had transitioned from hands-on flippers to the faces of a massive corporate entity, were no longer swinging the hammers themselves. They were relying on a vast network of local subcontractors who were being squeezed by production companies demanding perfection on a budget and a deadline that defied the laws of physics. It was only a matter of time before the relentless pursuit of television magic resulted in a catastrophic real-world failure. That moment arrived with the harrowing story of Mindy and Paul King. In 2018, the King family stepped into their newly renovated Las Vegas home, surrounded by the beaming Scott brothers and the blinding glare of studio lights, experiencing what they believed was the culmination of a lifelong dream. When the episode aired, it was celebrated as another flawless triumph of the Property Brothers brand. But as soon as the production trucks pulled away and the illusionary lighting was stripped from the walls, the dream rapidly curdled into a nightmare. Instead of a sanctuary, the Kings alleged they were living inside a danger zone. According to a massive lawsuit filed in Clark County, Nevada, in early 2021, the masterpiece was hiding a horrifying litany of over 90 health and safety violations. The details of the King lawsuit read like a horror story for any homeowner. Behind the beautiful backsplash and custom cabinetry were allegedly exposed electrical wires, improperly secured gas lines that leaked toxic fumes into the home, crooked cabinets, and uneven flooring. The production company behind the show, Sineflix, along with the actual contracting firm used for the build, Villa Construction, were accused of prioritizing the aesthetic demands of the television reveal over the basic, legally mandated building codes designed to keep human beings safe. The most chilling aspect of the lawsuit was the revelation that Villa Construction allegedly did not even possess the proper permits for significant portions of the work. The rush to get the reveal shot on schedule had seemingly overridden any adherence to municipal safety regulations. For the Kings, the financial and emotional damages exceeded $100,000, but the psychological toll of realizing their family had been sleeping feet away from engrounded electrical hazards and gas leaks was incalculable. While Drew and Jonathan Scott were not initially named as individual defendants in the litigation, the legal battle placed a massive, lingering stain on their carefully curated brand. The case highlighted a profound disconnect in the reality television ecosystem. The charismatic stars who promise expertise and quality are legally shielded by layers of corporate bureaucracy, leaving the homeowners to battle faceless production companies and overworked subcontractors when things go wrong. Seinflix vehemently denied the allegations, dismissing the Kings as disgruntled participants looking for a payout, but the physical evidence cited in the court documents, backed by local building inspectors who had to condemn portions of the work, told a vastly different story. As the lawsuit dragged on through the mid-2020s, it served as a stark, permanent reminder that you cannot edit out a fire hazard, nor can you CGI a structurally sound foundation over a rushed, negligent build. The Kings were not merely victims of bad luck. They were collateral damage in a business model that viewed a family home as a temporary television set first and a place to live second. Yet, as the legal clouds gathered over their professional empire, an even more devastating storm was brewing behind closed doors, threatening the very fabric of the Scott family. The public was largely unaware that while the brothers were filming back-to-back episodes of perpetual domestic bliss, their personal lives were unraveling in ways that no amount of television editing could fix. The cracks first became visible through the suffering of J.D. Scott, the lesser-known third Scott brother, who had been instrumental in building the behind-the-scenes infrastructure of the Property Brothers empire. In 2019, while working on a filming segment, JD's body abruptly and mysteriously shut down. He was plunged into a state of excruciating chronic pain, extreme sensitivity to heat, and a suffocating mental fog that brought him to the brink of despair. In a deeply personal documentary released in 2021, JD revealed that there were moments during this ordeal where he genuinely believed he was dying. The diagnosis, when it finally came, was as bizarre as it was devastating: fluoroquinolone toxicity. JD had suffered a severe, life-altering reaction to a common class of antibiotics, which essentially poisoned his body's connective tissues and central nervous system. Imagine the cruel irony of the situation. The Scott family had built an international brand on the concept of fixing broken structures, of tearing out the bad and replacing it with the good, yet they were utterly powerless to fix the crumbling biological framework of their own brother. JD became so sensitive to his environment that even the slightest shift in temperature felt like his skin was burning alive. The physical agony quickly cascaded into severe depression, creating a dual nightmare that no amount of fame or fortune could alleviate. For Drew and Jonathan, the psychological burden was immense. They were forced to maintain the high-energy, problem-solving personas required by their television contracts, all while privately acting as caretakers for a brother they feared might not survive. The invincible Scott brothers persona was suddenly revealed to be a fragile fiction. The family's crucible did not end with JD's agonizing journey toward recovery. Almost concurrently, Drew Scott's wife, Linda Fan, was thrust into her own harrowing medical nightmare. In 2020, at the exact time the couple was publicly hoping to start a family, Linda was diagnosed with Graves' disease, a relentless autoimmune disorder that forces the thyroid gland into dangerous overdrive, wreaking havoc on the body's metabolism, heart rate, and overall energy levels. The diagnosis ushered in a grueling, emotionally exhausting 2-year period defined by invasive fertility treatments, including multiple rounds of in vitro fertilization that ended in heartbreaking failure. Consider the immense psychological strain of this juxtaposition. Drew Scott was spending his days on television sets, guiding anxious couples through the